Hello, good evening everybody. Maayong buntag sa Philippines. Magandang umaga po sa Pilipinas. This is Nick Caracal. I am actually doing Facebook Live here in Queens, New York. So finally, we have some good news na sobrang realistic. Finally, the suspension that actually ex-President Trump or the former President Trump has actually imposed last year has finally been lifted. President Biden actually issued an executive order revoking those proclamations, and we're going to talk about that sa ngayon. So ang pag-uusapan natin, paano bang epekto nun? So generally speaking, it will be a good news for everybody who has been waiting for a long time with yung cases nila na nasa embassy na or nasa NVC na. Then let's talk about that, how it affects your pending cases, right? But overall, it is a good news for everybody. So share ko lang yung screen natin dito, and again, just disclaimer, this is for presentation and for educational purposes only. Any specific advice or advice na maibigay ko does not create a lawyer-client relationship. So, but still the same, alam nyo na yung exercise natin. If you have specific questions, then you can actually just write them down on the comments below, and we will try to tackle them as we go along with the presentation. Okay, so here's actually the screenshot of, lakihan ko lang muna. This is actually coming directly from the whitehouse.gov website. This is a proclamation and revoking Proclamation 114. This was actually the original version of former President Trump's suspension of entry of immigrants who pose a risk to the United States labor market during the economic recovery following the 2019 pandemic. It was extended by Proclamation 152 issued on June 22, 2020. It's called the suspension of entry of immigrants and non-immigrants who pose and present a risk. And it was actually further extended last December na supposedly dapat mag-take into effect hanggang March 31, 2021. However, with the proclamation now, 114, it basically revoked all those. And that's basically a good news, especially for people who are already at either the NVC or at the embassy level. But before we can go into the details further, let's just recall or pag-usapan lang muna natin kung ano ba ang nagiging dahilan ni President Biden why he actually revoked those former proclamations, no? So at the time kasi sa time ni Trump, he actually said that he needs to do these proclamations because he felt like allowing immigrants or non-immigrants to enter the United States will actually pose danger to the United States, or actually been a challenge for people who are actually losing jobs at the time, and then you are actually welcoming people to the United States to look for jobs, and it will be a threat to the labor market. However, further studies says that that has not been the case. As a matter of fact, in the long run, and the long run means over a year, it actually the United States lose a lot. No, some of the examples that they actually mentioned that it actually harmed the United States by preventing some family members of the United States from being reunited with their family, and even for the green card holders, right, who are being trapped outside the United States. They also said that it actually harms the industries in the United States that utilizes talents from around the world, or some applicants to actually receive the opportunity to apply for or receive their immigrant visas. Ito na yung nangyayari sa embassy, no? Ang daming mga taong frustrated, disappointed with all the changes that's happening, with their visas being held up dahil na rin sa pandemic. Then there's additional Trump suspension na na-issue na sana yun yung visa nila, but they cannot actually go home because hindi pa nila nakukuha yung visa again because of some restrictions, right? So that's the main reason why President Biden now revoked those proclamations and issued that those are no longer in effect, and but it doesn't mean that pag-usapan na natin yung restrictions na kasi masaya na tayo na finally wala na yung mga suspension na yun. But there are still safeguards though that the president actually has put in place. So one of them is that it says nothing in this proclamation shall be construed as to impair or otherwise affect the authority of the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof. As a matter of fact, a few weeks ago, President Biden actually had given some idea that he would actually open the operations of the U.S. embassies abroad, subject to the embassy's situation, how they handle or how the country handled the COVID-19 pandemic. No, so kung kunwari, what he is actually trying to say is, depende sa country, kung halimbawa mataas pa rin yung risk of contamination, then as much as you would wanted to open the US embassies abroad, then they actually give that authority to whoever is heading that US embassy, whether to fully open or they are still going to have that restrictions in opening, again, just to actually contain the spread of the coronavirus. Another issues that could also potentially affect the operations of the embassy is funding issues. That's why it actually says here, the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. Because then again, no matter how much the president would love to open the embassies all abroad, but if there will be resources that has to be used in order to do that, and if there will be limitations or restrictions as far as the resources, then they are going to respect the decision of those heads or managers. These proclamations shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. But overall, it's a good news for everybody. Then let's talk about paano ba o ano bang ibig sabihin nito to your case. Okay? So, let's just summarize this way. The new proclamation does not affect yung non-immigrant visas being processed and issued in the United States, right? So what does that mean? That if you are presently in the United States and some petitioner, whether it's a family-based or an employment-based visa has been filed for you, the proclamation of the president does not affect that process. So even with the Trump suspension, people were still able to file petitions and people were still granted and being approved of their visas because nandito sila sa United States. Another process that has not been affected by the new proclamation is that people who are applying for green card na nandito sa US, they will still be able to apply and they are still going to wait for their visas to be scheduled for interview when the right time comes. So they will have their green card interviews. So again, number 3, it does not affect the filing of cases or petitions or applications in the United States. Because even before the pandemic and during the pandemic, tuloy-tuloy pa rin naman ang pagpa-file na yon. There were significant delays as observed at USCIS, but that's understandable. But again, there are funding issues, there are safety and health issues that they have to observe because they are going to protect their employees as well. But overall, this does not affect yung 3 processes na pinag-usapan natin. It also does not affect the operations of the National Visa Center. However, indirectly, ang trabaho kasi ng National Visa Center is that the National Visa Center does not decide on cases. Ang trabaho lang nila is to coordinate with the US Embassy once your application is being approved and that the final adjudication or the final issuance of your visa will be held outside the United States. So, nagkikipag-coordinate lang ang National Visa Center in terms of collecting your documents. And once your documentation has been reviewed and they are actually finalized at wala ng issue, it will be forwarded to the embassy kung saan kayo mag-i-interview. And it's basically between the embassy and the embassy coordinating kung kailan ang interview nyo. So again, that is not being directly affected by the proclamation, but in a way, indirectly, mas ma-enhance ngayon ang co-coordinate the National Visa Center with the corresponding embassy because now the embassy has no legal basis of holding up those cases na kumpleto na yung bayad sa immigrant fees or NVC fees or if they already have complied with the documentary requirements. No? Ang pinag-usapan na lang natin ngayon is how safe is for that US embassy to operate. So, but other than that, kung hindi lang on the issue of safety and wellness of the employees and for the operations of the embassy, dapat tuloy-tuloy na tayo. Okay? So again, at the National Visa Center, you should still be able to submit your documents, pay your fees, and then once it's completed, it should be documentarily qualified or DQ ang tawag doon. no? And once it's been DQ'd, it is now the job of the National Visa Center para makipag-coordinate sa embassy para ma-set na yung interview nyo. So then let's recall, ano ba yung proclamations ni former President Trump na naging na-lift or tinanggal na ni Biden? So this is one of the proclamations na ginawa ni Trump, suspended the entry of non-immigrants, of some immigrants and non-immigrants into the United States because then again, they present a risk to the U.S. labor market during the economic recovery following the COVID-19 outbreak. And that proclamation has been extended up to March 31, 2021 until President Biden lifted that. So it's no longer in effect, and that's a good news because tuloy-tuloy na ang ating pagpaproseso sa embassy. So again, we're just going to recall what was the previous proclamations, no? So the entry in the United States of aliens as immigrants are hereby suspended, and if you recall, even the non-immigrant visa categories, the J, H, L visa categories has also been suspended. There were injunctions sometime in October, November, but now with the president's revocation or new proclamation, wala na yon, no? Wala na yon. So it's been lifted, which is good news. So again, we are just going to recall that former President Trump actually said that kung mga taong nasa labas ng United States out as of April 23, 2020 will not be able to enter the United States unless they already have the visa issued or the visa on hand or they have actually a travel permit. And that they are only allowing spouses and minor children of green card holders na mayroong valid visa, na walang the non-health professionals or considered essential workers. They are allowing those, but for persons na hindi US citizen, spouse of a US citizen or a child of a US citizen, so dito ngayon nagsasuffer yung mga spouses of a green card holder or actually petitions of a child to their parents or mga sibling petitions or widower or widow visas. Dahil hindi nga sila considered immediate relatives, they were not allowed to enter the United States at the time of President Trump. But ngayon, it actually gives everybody a free hand to enter the United States depending on the availability and the resources at the embassy. So again, going back to the former President Trump's suspension, they are allowing any lawful permanent resident or green card holders to enter the United States. If you are considered as an essential worker, then you may be able to enter the United States. If you are a spouse of a U.S. citizen, you are allowed to enter the United States. If you are a minor child of or adoptee of a U.S. citizen, you are allowed to enter the United States. And of course, the AB5, Armed Forces, pag-usapan natin ngayon. But ngayon, with the Biden's proclamation, everybody could enter the United States. So if you have a pending petition at the embassy, I would recommend that you send a letter or email to them expediting your case due to unreasonable delay. I would just want to comment on that kasi may mga clients kami na naiinis na dahil yung iba daw were able to schedule their own interviews. I would want to correct that because again, we've been dealing with the US Embassy, particularly in Manila, every day. No, you're gonna call the U.S. Embassy. No one will answer your phone. No one will answer the phone. The only way that the embassy would call you is either sila yung tatawag sa'yo or magpapadala sila ng email sa'yo. And here's the other problem though. There's a lot of glitches between the NVC. They would actually send out email saying, oh, you have an interview date, and that will be recognized by the embassy. Then one day after, you will receive an email saying that your interview has been canceled. The worst scenario is that wala ka natanggap na interview notice, but you will receive an email that your interview date has been canceled. And what people do is that they are going to call us that, hey, why didn't you tell us na may interview date na pala kami? When in reality, wala naman talagang interview date. So as of now, if you're gonna look into your US travel accounts, you cannot open the calendar. Walang availability doon. The only thing that's happening now is that the embassy are calling the applicants to tell them that they already have an interview date, or they are actually going to schedule them through email that they have an interview date. So again, with the Biden proclamation, we don't know how it will change the operations of the embassy, because then again, even the proclamation recognizes that the embassy would still have that authority to make a decision whether or not they are going to fully open their operations or partially open, or will actually open depending on what the resources would allow. Okay, so I'm now open for more questions. But that's basically what the Biden proclamation is all about. Kung ano mang mga restrictions na binigay ni former President Trump, wala na yan. So continue to work with your case, submit your documents to the NVC. Once you have completed that process, then the embassy should be able to accommodate you. Okay, so then I will start answering questions here. Okay, wala yatang mga nagtanong, but okay, si Crisostomo, kasama na ba dito ang J1? Yes. If you actually notice that it was suspended during the time of Trump, but now with the lifting of that suspension, everybody now is open. So again, depending ngayon sa availability ng resources ng embassy. Pwede na ma-expedite ang sa eldest ko po. So ma'am, we've been expediting. Yes, we could actually send an email to the embassy now. What Ma'am Mary is actually saying that if you have a K2, no, so these are actually derivative dependents from the embassy, then they would actually file those K2 now. However, ma'am, if your K2 has already reached 21 years old, and as we actually discussed kagabi, walang application ang CSPA, the Child Status Protection Act on fiancé visas, then unfortunately, they will not be able to follow to join. So, yung CSPA only applies for derivative children na lumagpas na ng 21 years old for immigrant visas. So, yun nga yung pinag-usapan natin kahapon, na part of the proposal is that the CSPA should be applied to the fiancé visa application. So, but then again, yun yung rules. But sometimes the embassy is actually, we've seen some cases where the embassy is actually giving some exceptions to that. But let's say, what you are still going to expedite your case, who knows, mapagbigyan tayo, no? But as a rule, hindi. Okay, so the questions here is Raymond. Attorney, when will they start to process the K1? As a matter of fact, they are actually processing K1 even with the suspension, but though they have restrictions, particularly in the U.S. Embassy in Manila, no? So, I don't know if you receive an email from them telling you, whenever you actually set an interview with them, or you're actually asking or submitting an expedited request, they will actually say that, hey, we are processing K1 visa applications, but because of the skeletal force working at the embassy, or because of their limited resources, they are going to prioritize the cases that they are going to process as far as the K1 is concerned. So if I could remember them, they are only processing those K1 applications of fiancé visa application whose K2 will be aging out. So ibig sabihin, magti-21 na nga, no? So for those actually K2 na follow to join, ibig sabihin yung K1 nandito na sa US, nagpa-follow to join na rin yung K2 at mag-age out na siya. Or if the K1 petitioner happens to be outside the United States kasi kasama niya yung K1 at may medical issue yung petitioner, then they would still be able to expedite the case. Other scenario is that they are going to expedite fiancé visa applications if meron kayong US citizen child together. So kasi posible yun, no? Hindi pa kayo nagpakasal but meron na kayong anak, then they are also going to expedite those cases. In another case, they are also going to expedite pag if the petitioner is a member of the military. But other than that, ma'am, with this suspension, again, it depende na lang talaga sa embassy kung anong kaya nila in terms of resources. Kasi wala nang suspension that would stop them from limiting or that would not allow them to schedule other categories other than child of a U.S. citizen or spouse of a U.S. citizen. So the embassy will be busy, no, with all this, considering na isang taon talaga silang selective lang yung cases na pinaprocess nila because of the combination of the pandemic as well as the suspension. But now, the suspension being lifted, then they should be able to accommodate more cases. Okay, and again, thank you for tagging. Um, So it means po, attorney, for example, H-1B at umalis sa Pilipinas, di na makabalik sa US kasi hindi bibigyan ng visa stamp. Again, boss, ito yung one of the examples na sinabi doon sa proclamation that it actually hurt the United States or the applicants mismo kasi imbes na makakuha na sila ng visa, but they happen to be a non-immigrant visa just like the H, L, and the J1, hindi sila ngayon pinaprocess ng embassy. But that being lifted now, the embassy should be able to accommodate them. Luisa, yun pong application ng daddy ko since 2007 pa. He's been approved and still waiting. So ma'am, this is also good news, right? Because again, if you are being petitioned by your sibling, yung brothers and sisters ng papa mo, ng nanay mo, or you are being petitioned, yung tatay, yung parents mo being petitioned by your lolo, yon, wala nang restriction yon, tuloy-tuloy na yon. So we actually have a lot of cases in that category. Then now we are going to contact the embassy to actually either request the issuance of their visa or schedule their embassy interviews. Baby, will this still consider yung mga nag-age out under F31? Dahil sa extension. So, the good thing about the F31, ma'am, is applicable yung CSPA. No? So, again, depende kung marami kasing factor ma'am pag-calculate ka ng CSPA. If you know how to calculate that and the resulting number is yung anak mo is less than 21, yes, you would be able to actually process that. And I would recommend that when you coordinate with the embassy, sa letterhead ng email mo, sabihin mo, aging out. Yung beneficiary na yun. So they will be able to expedite the case. Mavis, sorry, I would like to ask if pwede na po mag-process ng J2 visa. Yes, ma'am, because na-lift na yung suspension. Ma'am Rosalinda, how about our papers? Is it good? So ma'am, we are now going to coordinate with the embassy kasi nga hindi na kayo part sa suspension. Louis, are the ones handling the processing family-based and employment-based the same? I mean, the agent in the US consulates. I am not so sure how the consulates are being subdivided, but in terms of scheduling, ma'am, for their interviews, it's the same process. Once you have paid the fees at the NBC and that you are already submitted your papers or your documents, then you should be ready to be scheduled for interview. How they organize their employees with their family base, that we do not know. But the good thing is they should be open now. They are not going to discriminate whether it's a family-based or an employment-based visa. Raymond, is it possible po to process your K1 fiancé sa Philippines this year? And pwede na po ba i-allow ang foreigner? Okay, so first question mo, boss, are they processing K1 visa now? Just like what I said, they've been processing fiancé visas even last year, though very limited. So I don't know how the embassy would respond to the proclamation, whether or not they are going to increase the number of people working at the embassy, because there is also another factor that you have to consider, and that's the pandemic, no? So they have to balance between opening the gates for more visa processing as well as the health of their employees. Pwede na po, yung second part kasi nung question mo, pwede na po ba i-allow ang foreign to visit the Philippines? Boss, you're actually asking a Philippine regulation or restriction. So I would recommend that you visit the Philippine Embassy or Philippine Consulate website. They actually provided guidance doon kung makapag-visit na ba ang mga foreigners in the Philippines. Yan, pwede po mag-expedite ang overage po pero CSPA protected po. Ma'am, for as long as they would, yung resulting calculation mo sa CSPA, the applicant will be less than 21 years old, yes, you can expedite that. And again, put that in the header that the beneficiary will be aging out. And in most cases, the embassy will actually accommodate them. If they put papers in the Manila embassy already, so we can just schedule an interview. You cannot schedule an interview, kagaya na sinabi ko kanina, Mara, the calendars are not open, no? You call the embassy, you can be waiting for hours, and sometimes somebody will pick up, then they will drop the call. The best way to communicate with the embassy, either to request for a schedule or to expedite your case, is through email. Paul, ilang days po magbibigay ng interview date ang embassy? Basically, before the pandemic, once your documents are DQ'd, no, or kompleto ka na sa requirements, they would actually give out 1 month, no, from the time na na DQ ka na, no. But with the pandemic, you really could not tell now. So again, I really hope that the embassies abroad would be able to increase their workforce to be able to accommodate the additional number of cases that to be processed now with the suspension of Trump being lifted. PH open naman po for interviews. Ano? Yes, they are open, though limited. Cathy, ano pong priority date nyo? Kailan po na ipa-file? Okay, I think she's trying to answer somebody. Okay, again, wala nang tanong. And again, thank you very much for joining in. That's actually a good news that finally wala nang suspension of other non-immigrant visa types. So I would recommend for people who are already at the embassy or at the NVC, send an email to them, request for an expedited interview, and the embassy will definitely contact them. So may pahabol lang dito si Sir Louie. How will be the order of the scheduling of the interview? According to the system, boss, it's actually a first come, first serve basis. So at the NVC level, they are going to process applications based on the visa number availability. Tinitingnan mo ngayon na visa bulletin, and then it will be forwarded to USCIS forward approve applications to the NVC. Then ipa-prioritize nila yon based on the visa number availability. No? So kung if you talk about retrogression, but sa ngayon naman, current naman ang employment base, and of course, yung mga married children of, may maghihintay pa rin yun. No? So it will be based on priority date based on first come, first served basis at the NVC. Now, once the visa numbers are available because nakikita yun na current siya sa visa bulletin, then the embassy will also prioritize them based on the first come, first served basis based on priority dates. Na-hold yung J1 visa, ma'am, they just have to coordinate with the embassy para ma-schedule na kanilang interview. Okay? So again, maraming salamat everyone. Palabo na lang si Grace. Yung mga tourist visa po ba pwede na pumasok sa USA? Ma'am, with the lifting of the suspension, they should be able to yung mga may visa na, may tourist visa, they are now able to enter the United States. So I think your question is, yung mag-a-apply ng tourist visa, pwede na ba sila mag-schedule? So again, you can just actually create your tourist visa, US travel, check pag nag-open na sila ng calendar. If not, send an email to the embassy or call the customer service number attending to non-immigrant visa interviews. Other than that, good luck everybody, and I hope this helps. And this actually give a little bit of light as far as achieving your American dream. Kasi nga, wala na yung suspension. Again, maraming salamat po.